I kept the signal running for 31 days. That is the part no one remembers. They remember the human frigate. They remember what came after. But no one asks about the 31 days of nothing, the empty dark, the hum of a distress beacon pulsing into a void that did not answer. My name is Sorath Kell. I was convoy coordinator for the Velhari 3rd Drift, 11 civilian transports, 2 research barges, and a fuel tender that had been leaking deuterium since the 2nd week. We were not a military formation. We were not armed. We were 4,000 bioluminescent researchers, families, technicians, and children, stranded in the Qasad corridor, after the Rechelon coalition declared the sector quarantined and sealed the transit lanes behind us. They did not evacuate us first. The Rechelon coalition, 14 species, the Velhari among them, declared the corridor a disputed exclusion zone after a border skirmish with the Torvan sovereignty, locked the transit gates, and left 11 civilian ships on the wrong side. Our transponders were registered. Our manifest was on file. They knew we were here. I sent the first distress call on the 3rd day, when the fuel tender's leak made it clear we could not reach the nearest gate on our own. Wide band, coalition emergency frequency, every 4 hours. By the 8th day, I had sent 47 calls. I had received nothing. By the 14th, the children's deck on the 2nd transport had lost climate regulation. We moved 200 families into cargo holds on the research barges, holds designed for specimen containers, not for people. The Velhari do not handle cold well. Our luminescence dims when we are afraid or weakened. Walking those corridors at night, the overhead panels dark to save power, I could see it, the glow fading from the people pressed against the bulkheads, wrapped in thermal sheeting, their light going out a little more each day. A healthy Velhari glows soft amber from the throat and along the forearms. A dying one goes dark. I kept sending. On day 19, the convoy's senior physician, Dr. Ireth Saul, told me quietly that we had 9 days of medical supplies remaining. Not 9 days of comfort, 9 days before the wounded from the fuel tender's partial rupture would begin dying of infection. She said it without drama. She was Velhari. Our kind do not shout when we are afraid. We dim. On day 23, I sent a call on the open band, not the coalition frequency, but the band that reaches everyone, every species, every ship, every listening post in range. I said who we were, where we were, what we had left, and what would happen if no one came. I said it in Velhari, then in Galactic Standard, then in 3 trade languages I had picked up on cargo routes. No answer from the coalition. No answer from the Torvan. No answer from the neutral observer stations, the guild relays, the waypoint repeaters. It was as though the sector had been erased from every chart in the galaxy. I remember sitting at the comms console on day 27, my forearms completely dark for the first time in my life, and thinking, we are going to die here, and no one will know until a patrol finds the convoy months from now, cold and drifting and silent. On day 31, the signal came back. Not a coalition signal, not a Torvan hail, not a guild relay bounce. It was a human transmission, plain text, no encryption, pushed through on a frequency I had never seen used for anything but old Earth origin navigation beacons. The message was 11 words. Received your distress. Frigate pale morning en route. Hold position. I stared at the screen for a long time. Humans. I had met a human once, years before. A cargo handler at a transit port on the outer lanes. Quiet, compact, polite in a flat, unhurried way that I had mistaken for indifference. They were not coalition members. They were not signatories to any of the treaties that governed the corridor. They had no obligation, no mandate, no mutual defense clause that would have routed a distress call their way. They heard it anyway. The pale morning arrived 14 hours later. She was not a warship, she was not an armada, she was a Halcyon-class light frigate, a border patrol vessel with a crew of 38, running standard sweeps along the outer trade lanes where human territory brushes against the corridor's edge. She was small, and she was alone. She was enough. I watched her come in through the forward viewport of the lead transport. She dropped out of transit without ceremony. No formation, no escort, no broadcast announcement. Just a single ship, hull scarred from years of deep space patrol, running lights steady, sliding into position alongside our convoy, like she had done this 100 times before. The human captain hailed us on the same plain text frequency. Her voice was level, not warm, not cold, the way someone sounds when they have done a thing many times and no longer find it remarkable. Convoy Coordinator, this is Captain Ren Vasek, UES Pale Morning. We have medical personnel, hull patch teams, rations, and a portable climate unit, requesting permission to come aboard your lead vessel. I could not speak for a moment. Around me on the bridge, 4 Velhari officers who had not slept properly in weeks were staring at the viewport, at the frigate, at her running lights cutting steady lines through the dark we had lived inside for a month. Permission granted, I said. My voice cracked on the second word. I did not try to hide it. They were aboard within the hour. Not a battalion. 16 people, 8 medical staff, 4 engineers, 2 logistics officers, and 2 crew carrying equipment crates. They moved through our ships the way water fills a dry channel, quietly, steadily, reaching every gap. The medics found the wounded on the fuel tender before I had finished briefing their logistics officer. Dr. Saul told me later that the human trauma surgeon, a woman named Oshiro, short and unhurried, with hands that moved as if they had memorized every wound the galaxy could produce, had the 3 worst cases stabilized inside 40 minutes. She did not ask what species we were. She did not consult a reference file. She looked at the injuries, asked Dr. Saul 2 questions about Velhari vascular structure, and went to work. The engineers sealed the fuel tender's leak in 6 hours. It had been killing us slowly for 3 weeks. 6 hours. Then they moved to the climate systems on the children's transport and had heat restored before morning. The logistics officers set up a distribution point in our main cargo hold. Rations, water purification packets, thermal blankets, emergency lamps. Human rations, formulated for human metabolisms, but they had run the Velhari dietary profile through their ship's database during the 14-hour transit and adjusted the caloric loads before they came aboard. Someone on that frigate had looked up what our species could eat and packed for it. I stood in the cargo hold and watched a young human crewman, maybe 25 by their years, with a face that had not yet learned to hide what it felt, hand a thermal blanket to a Velhari child whose glow had gone nearly dark. The child took it without speaking. The crewman knelt and tucked the blanket around her shoulders, carefully. The way you handle something you understand is fragile. The child's forearms pulsed. A faint amber flicker, the first light I had seen from a child on this convoy in weeks. I turned away from that. I am not ashamed of it. Captain Vasek found me on the bridge an hour later. She was not tall. She wore no sidearm. She stood in the doorway of my own bridge, on my own ship, in a sector her species had no treaty right to enter, and she looked at me with the calm, unhurried attention of a person who was already thinking about the next task on her list. "We'll escort you to the Meridian waypoint," she said. "It's outside the quarantine boundary. Your coalition can arrange transit home from there." "The coalition sealed the corridor," I said. "They left us here." She looked at me. Something moved behind her eyes. Not pity, not anger. Something quieter and harder to name. The look of a person who has heard this before. "We didn't," she said. That was all. She turned and walked back toward the docking collar to coordinate the escort. I have told this account to the Velhari High Deliberative. I have filed it with the Coalition Transit Authority. I have entered it into every record I am permitted to access. The human frigate Pale Morning, crew of 38, answered a distress call that 14 coalition species and 6 neutral observer stations ignored for 31 days. They came alone and unauthorized, without treaty obligation, into a quarantined sector, and they saved 4,000 Velhari lives with 16 people and 6 hours of work. When the Pale Morning broke formation at the Meridian waypoint and turned back toward her patrol lane, I stood at the viewport and watched her go. Her running lights shrank to a point, and then to nothing, and then there was just the dark again, but it was a different dark now, a smaller one. I said something as she disappeared, a single line in Old Velhari, the kind of phrase we keep for someone who has carried a weight that was never theirs to lift. There is no clean translation in any language I know. The nearest I can offer is this: you came when the light was going out. I did not log it. Some things are not meant for the record. But I will tell you this. For the first time in 31 days, The glow along my forearms was steady and warm and bright enough to read by.